My beloved child, stop for a moment and listen closely, because you did not arrive at this message by accident. There is something about this moment that you need to hear before you move forward with the rest of your day. I know you may have been wondering why your heart has felt unusually restless lately, why certain memories keep returning when you least expect them, or why you sometimes feel as though someone, somewhere, is thinking about you at the exact moment you are thinking about them. Don't skip this part, because something huge is waiting for you, and the message you are about to hear may touch a place inside you that you have been protecting for a very long time. Last night, something happened that changed the emotional direction of a connection you thought had gone quiet. It may have happened in a dream, in a sudden realization, through a conversation, or simply in the silence of someone's room when they finally allowed themselves to admit what they had been trying to avoid. Someone has been carrying words inside their heart for months, words they rehearsed privately but never found the courage to say aloud. And now, those words are getting closer to the surface. This person has not forgotten you. They have not simply erased the memories and moved forward as though nothing mattered. There is a reason certain moments between you still feel unfinished. There is a reason the story never received the ending you expected. And there is a reason this message begins with something that happened last night. Stay till the end, because the most important part is not what happened on the surface. It is what that moment revealed about what has been happening underneath. Imagine someone sitting alone, looking at an old message, an old photograph, or simply remembering the sound of your voice. They may have stared at their screen without typing anything. They may have opened a conversation and closed it again. They may have asked themselves the same question they have been asking for months: what if I had told them the truth? That question became heavier last night. Something inside them shifted. Perhaps they suddenly realized that time was not making the feeling disappear. Perhaps they realized that distance had not erased the connection. Perhaps they understood that staying silent was no longer giving them peace. And that is why you need to listen carefully. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, and the revelation may not arrive in the dramatic way you imagined. Sometimes the biggest turning points begin quietly, inside one person's heart, long before they become visible in the outside world. There is a secret behind the silence that you may not have understood until now. For months, this person may have appeared calm, distant, distracted, or even completely unaffected, but appearances can hide an enormous amount of emotion. They learned how to continue their routine while carrying an unanswered question inside themselves. They learned how to smile while remembering you. They learned how to stay busy when your memory appeared unexpectedly. They may have told themselves that enough time had passed, that they should stop thinking about the connection, that perhaps it was better to leave everything in the past. But every time they tried to convince themselves, another memory returned. A particular conversation. A particular look. A moment when they felt understood without needing to explain themselves. Something about you remained difficult to replace. And last night, that realization became impossible to ignore. Don't skip, because this is where the story becomes deeper. There is a difference between missing someone's presence and realizing that someone left a permanent emotional impression. This person may have discovered that what they felt was not simply temporary attraction or passing curiosity. They may have discovered that you became connected to a part of their life they never fully closed. That is why the words "I have been waiting months to tell you this" carry so much weight. Waiting does not always mean waiting for a perfect opportunity. Sometimes it means waiting for courage. Waiting for certainty. Waiting until fear becomes smaller than the desire to finally speak. And perhaps last night, that balance changed. Maybe they finally admitted to themselves that they cannot keep pretending they have nothing to say. Maybe they realized that the longer they remain silent, the more difficult it becomes to explain why they disappeared, hesitated, or held back. There is something they want you to understand about their behavior. It may not have been rejection. It may not have been indifference. It may have been confusion, fear, timing, or an internal struggle they never knew how to explain. They may have needed time to understand their own feelings before asking you to understand them. And now, after months of carrying this privately, something has begun to break through that silence. Stay till the end, because there is another layer to this story that you cannot see yet. The person connected to this message may have been closer to telling you the truth than you realized. They may have written words they never sent. They may have imagined the conversation repeatedly. They may have wondered how you would react if they finally stopped hiding behind silence. And last night, one thought may have become stronger than every excuse they had created: I cannot keep this inside forever. Listen carefully to what your heart may have been trying to tell you, because sometimes the most important revelation begins with a question rather than an answer. Why does this connection still feel unfinished? Why do certain memories refuse to lose their emotional power? Why does the thought of hearing from this person create a reaction that you cannot easily explain? You may have tried to move on mentally, yet some quiet part of you continued wondering whether there was something left unsaid. This does not mean you should stop living your life or wait for someone indefinitely. It means that unresolved emotions can remain powerful when two people never had the conversation they truly needed. And perhaps that is exactly what is changing now. Something happened last night that forced this person to look honestly at what they have been avoiding. Maybe they saw something that reminded them of you. Maybe they heard a song that brought back a memory. Maybe someone mentioned a place, a phrase, or a moment connected to you. Maybe they had a dream that felt unusually vivid. Or maybe nothing external happened at all. Maybe the event was entirely internal. They simply reached a point where pretending became harder than admitting the truth. That can happen after months of silence. A person can hold emotions down for a long time, but suppression is not the same as resolution. Eventually, the heart asks to be heard. And when it does, old memories can suddenly feel new again. Don't skip, because there is something powerful about the timing of this message. You are hearing it at a moment when your own understanding may be changing too. You may have spent time asking whether you were imagining the connection, whether the other person ever cared as deeply as you did, or whether the entire story mattered only to you. But what if they were asking themselves the same questions from the other side? What if their silence came from uncertainty rather than absence of feeling? What if they were afraid that reaching out would reopen something they did not know how to handle? What if they were afraid you had already forgotten them? Sometimes two people can care deeply and still remain silent because each person is waiting for proof that it is safe to speak. That is why last night matters. It represents a moment of recognition. A moment when someone may have realized that waiting has its own cost. And when that realization arrives, a person begins to see the past differently. They stop focusing only on what went wrong and start remembering what was genuine. Now let me take you to the part that may surprise you most. The person you are thinking about may not have been waiting for months simply to say that they miss you. There may be something more specific they have wanted to explain. Something about why they behaved the way they did. Something about what they were feeling when they walked away, became distant, delayed a decision, or failed to say what you needed to hear. They may want to tell you that there was a conversation happening inside their mind that you never heard. While you were seeing silence, they may have been experiencing conflict. While you were seeing distance, they may have been struggling with closeness. While you were wondering whether you mattered, they may have been wondering whether they were capable of giving the connection what it deserved. This does not excuse every action, and it does not mean you should ignore your own boundaries. But it can explain why some connections become complicated even when feelings are real. Perhaps this person believed they needed to become stronger, wiser, or more certain before returning. Perhaps they feared disappointing you. Perhaps they thought that staying away was somehow protecting both of you from another painful moment. Yet last night, something may have made them question that decision. And that question could become the beginning of a very different chapter. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, and you need to hear the next part because this is where the hidden emotion begins to reveal itself. They may have realized that what they actually regret is not meeting you, not knowing you, or not caring enough. Their regret may be that they did not communicate clearly when communication mattered most. They may have replayed certain moments and thought, should have said it then. They may have. Person returns, they will not be speaking to the same version of you they once knew. They may encounter someone who understands their own worth more clearly. Someone who no longer needs to force an outcome. someone who can listen without abandoning their own standards. And perhaps that is exactly why this moment feels different. The connection may be approaching a point where truth matters more than fantasy. You do not need to create a perfect story in your mind. You do not need to predict every detail. Simply listen to what the situation is teaching you. The biggest revelation may not be that someone is thinking about you. The biggest revelation may be that you are finally ready to hear the truth without losing yourself inside it. Don't skip this part, because that distinction matters. When someone has been silent for months, their eventual words may bring relief, clarity, surprise, or even emotions you did not expect. But your response belongs to you. You do not have to rush. You do not have to make an immediate decision. You can listen. You can ask questions. You can observe whether their actions match their words. You can allow time to reveal whether the change is genuine. And perhaps that is what makes the next chapter so powerful. The person who once hesitated may now understand that words alone are not enough. They may know that if they want another chance to be part of your life, they must communicate clearly and consistently. Last night may have been the beginning of that realization. Something huge is waiting for you, but it may not be a dramatic declaration. It may be something more valuable: clarity. After months of wondering, you may finally understand what was really happening behind the silence. There is a moment I want you to imagine. It is late. Everything around this person is quiet. The noise of the day has disappeared. There is nobody to impress, nobody to distract them, and no reason to pretend. In that silence, memories have a way of becoming honest. They may have looked at their phone. They may have thought about contacting you. They may have opened your conversation. And for a few seconds, they may have allowed themselves to imagine what would happen if they simply told you everything. No carefully chosen excuses. No pretending to be unaffected. No pretending that the connection meant nothing. Just the truth. I thought about you more than I admitted. I wondered whether you had moved on. I wanted to reach out, but I did not know how. There were things I wanted to tell you, but I kept waiting. I was afraid of what your answer might be. I never really stopped caring. These are the kinds of truths people sometimes carry silently because saying them makes everything real. Last night, perhaps they finally became real to themselves. And once a person admits something privately, it becomes much harder to continue living as though it does not exist. Don't skip, because the next stage after realization is often courage. Courage does not mean having no fear. It means deciding that the truth deserves to be heard despite the fear. This person may still hesitate. They may still overthink. They may still wonder whether you want to hear from them. But something has changed. The internal conversation has moved from "should I forget this?" to "should I finally say what I feel?" That shift is enormous. It can change the entire direction of a relationship. It can turn months of silence into one honest conversation. It can transform confusion into clarity. And perhaps that is why you felt drawn to this message. Not because every detail must happen exactly as imagined, but because something inside you is ready to understand the deeper meaning of what you have experienced. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, and the final truth of this part is closer than you think. Before this message ends, there is one thing you need to understand about the person who has been holding these words inside. They may have spent months wondering whether you still care. They may have been afraid that the distance changed everything. They may have imagined you moving forward, meeting someone else, forgetting the moments you shared, and closing the door completely. That possibility may have frightened them more than they ever admitted. Perhaps last night they suddenly realized that if they continue waiting, they may eventually lose the opportunity to speak honestly. And that realization can create a powerful emotional urgency. Not pressure. Not panic. Simply the understanding that meaningful connections should not always be left to silence. Maybe they are finally preparing to say what they should have said long ago. Maybe they want to explain what happened. Maybe they want to apologize for the confusion. Maybe they want to tell you why they pulled away. Maybe they want to ask whether there is still a possibility of rebuilding trust. Or maybe they simply want you to know that you mattered more than their behavior ever showed. Whatever the exact words become, the important thing is the emotional truth beneath them. For months, something remained unfinished. Last night, that unfinished feeling became impossible to ignore. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, and this is not the moment to look away. You have spent enough time wondering whether the story was real, whether the feelings were mutual, whether the silence meant the end. Now you are approaching the part where the hidden truth begins to come into the light. The person may not have all the answers yet. They may still be gathering courage. But they are no longer as comfortable with silence as they once were. And sometimes that is the first sign that a conversation is approaching. A person does not always announce their transformation. May explain something you have been feeling deep inside but could never put into words. Something happened last night, something so unexpected, so emotionally powerful, that it may have changed the way your soulmate sees this connection forever. Do not skip this moment. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. And the deeper you go into this message, the more pieces of the mystery will begin to fall into place. For months, there has been something left unsaid, something held behind silence, hesitation, distance, and unanswered questions. You may have wondered why this person suddenly became quiet. Why certain conversations never happened, why the connection seemed to pause when your heart was expecting movement. But last night, something shifted. It may have begun with a memory, a dream, a sudden realization, or a moment when your soulmate could no longer pretend that their feelings were easy to ignore. And now, before you allow yourself to think that this is just another message about love, listen carefully, because there is a detail here that you were never supposed to overlook. The waiting has not necessarily meant the absence of love. Sometimes people become silent because they are trying to understand emotions that have become too powerful for them to explain. Sometimes the heart reaches a point where avoiding the truth becomes harder than admitting it. That is exactly where this story begins. Last night, your soulmate may have found themselves facing a truth they had been postponing for months, that no matter how much they tried to distract themselves, no matter how many ordinary days passed, and no matter how convincing their silence appeared from the outside, something about you continued returning to their mind. A familiar memory. A particular moment. A sentence you once said. The sound of your voice. The way you made them feel understood without demanding an explanation. And suddenly, the walls they had built around those feelings did not feel as strong as they once did. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. And there is a reason this message begins with what happened last night. Picture this carefully. The world becomes quiet, distractions disappear, and for a brief moment, a person is left alone with their own thoughts. That is when hidden feelings often become impossible to escape. Last night may have brought your soulmate into exactly such a moment. Something reminded them of you, and instead of pushing the thought away as they had done before, they allowed themselves to stay with it. They may have asked themselves a question they had been avoiding for a very long time: why am I still thinking about this person? And perhaps the answer surprised them. Because months can pass, circumstances can change. And life can move forward, yet certain connections do not disappear simply because someone stops talking about them. This is where the story becomes more intense. Your soulmate may have realized that the silence between you was not giving them peace. It was only giving them more time to think. Every unanswered question became louder. Every memory became sharper. Every moment they once considered insignificant suddenly seemed to carry meaning. And then came the realization that perhaps they were not waiting for the feelings to disappear. Perhaps, without admitting it, they were waiting for the courage to face them. That distinction changes everything. Do not scroll away now, because the next part of this message is where the emotional turning point begins. Something huge is waiting for you. The person you are thinking about may have spent months trying to convince themselves that they had moved on from this connection, only to discover that moving forward in life is not the same thing as moving away from a feeling. They could have been busy, surrounded by people, focused on responsibilities, pretending to be completely fine. But there are certain memories that return when everything becomes quiet. And last night, one of those memories may have returned with unusual force. It may have felt almost impossible for them to ignore. They may have remembered the way you looked at them, the comfort they felt around you, or a moment when they sensed that there was something deeper between you than either of you had the courage to acknowledge. Stay till the end, because this is not the point where the story ends. It is the point where the hidden truth starts becoming visible. Here is the part you may find difficult to believe. Sometimes the person who appears least affected is the person fighting the strongest internal battle. Your soulmate may not have shown you what was happening inside them. They may have appeared distant, calm, or even completely detached. But appearances can be misleading when someone is protecting a vulnerable part of themselves. Last night, that protection may have weakened. Perhaps they finally admitted to themselves that they still care. Perhaps they recognized that the connection left an imprint they cannot simply erase. Perhaps they realized that months of silence did not create closure, it created a deeper question. What if they had spoken sooner? What if they had been honest when the opportunity appeared? What if one conversation could have changed everything? These questions can become incredibly powerful when someone is alone with their thoughts. And once those questions appear, they are difficult to silence. That may be why the energy around this connection feels different now. Something has shifted from avoidance toward awareness. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. You need to hear this entire message before deciding what this moment means. Your soulmate's heart may have been carrying a sentence for months. One they could never quite say aloud. I have been waiting to tell you this. Not because they had no words, but because the words mattered too much. Saying them would make the situation real. Saying them would mean admitting that you affected them more deeply than they wanted anyone to know. Saying them could require vulnerability, honesty, and the possibility of hearing an answer they were not prepared for. So they waited. They observed. They remembered. They hesitated. And perhaps last night, they finally understood that waiting forever would not make the truth disappear. Now listen to this next detail, because this is where the mystery becomes even more powerful. There may have been a moment last night when your soulmate suddenly realized that they had been measuring other experiences against the memory of you. Maybe they encountered something beautiful and immediately thought, they would have loved this. Maybe they heard a song, saw a familiar place, noticed a certain time of night, or remembered a conversation that seemed insignificant at the time but now feels unforgettable. It is strange how memory works. A person can spend an entire day without consciously thinking about someone, and then one tiny detail opens a door they believed was closed. Suddenly, the emotions return. The questions return. The longing for clarity returns. And perhaps that is exactly what happened last night. A memory opened the door, and your soulmate walked through it instead of turning away. For the first time in months, they may have allowed themselves to consider what would happen if they stopped hiding behind uncertainty. What if they finally told you the truth? What if they admitted that they had not forgotten? What if the distance between you was never truly about a lack of feeling? What if fear, timing, confusion, or circumstances were standing between two people who still had something meaningful to say to each other? Do not skip this part. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and the most important revelation may not be what your soulmate feels. It may be what they are finally ready to understand about themselves. They may be realizing that love cannot always be controlled by logic. You cannot always schedule it, explain it, or force it to disappear. Sometimes the heart keeps a record long after the mind has declared the story finished, and then came the moment that may have changed everything. Imagine your soulmate sitting quietly, thinking about the past, and suddenly realizing that one question has remained unanswered: what if I had been honest? That question can carry enormous emotional weight. It can make old memories feel new again. It can transform ordinary moments into moments of regret, gratitude, and hope. Perhaps they remembered the opportunities they missed. Perhaps they thought about words they almost said but swallowed. Perhaps they remembered a time when you were waiting for them to open up and they chose silence instead. And maybe, for the first time, they understood the cost of that silence. Not necessarily because something terrible happened, but because silence can create distance where honesty could have created understanding. This realization may have brought tears, reflection, or simply a long period of quiet thought. And in that quiet, they may have reached a conclusion they had been avoiding: I still need to tell them. That is why you must stay with this message. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. The title of this message is not about a random confession. It is about a feeling that has been waiting behind months of hesitation. Your soulmate may have been carrying a message internally. And last night may have been the night when that message became impossible to ignore. They may not know exactly how to say it yet. They may still be deciding whether to reach out. But emotionally, something has already changed. The thought has moved from "I should forget this" to "I need to."